Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blue Star channel. Today it is that time of the year again as I will be doing the mid-season review of the Quake season. Now before I begin this video, I just want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July as the day that I am recording this video. It is 4th of July, it is Independence Day, and I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and just try to be safe tonight. Let's just try not to do something crazy like set off a firework that gets yourself injured or just do some drunk driving kind of incident. And that of course goes out to all those Quakes players that are probably going to be partying tonight for the 4th of July celebration. But talking about the video today and talk about the mid-season review of the Quakes, well, you already know what this is going to be like. It is going to be a video that I'm going to be talking a lot about how depressing this year has been and what has just gone completely wrong in this season. But instead of me talking about that, I'm actually instead just going to give you like a timeline of what has happened this season, because instead of me actually talking about what has gone wrong this season and what is some of the depressing thing that has happened this year, I'm kind of going to talk about it, but I think just to talk about that stuff won't be enough, and that I will be basically kind of repeating myself of what I've been saying a lot of times doing the preview and doing when I did the match vlog. So we're going to just talk about the timeline, and we're going to also talk about what is the future going to be with the Quakes. How can the Quakes fix this in the second half of the season, and do we still have any hopes in the playoff race? But in terms of the timeline, and you know, we start all the way back in the off season where we signed a couple of decent player. Well, at time we thought they were very decent player, but it turns out they were actually garbage. But we did sign Ericsson and also Quintana, and then we signed a bunch of kind of minor league players. We signed a couple of players from our affiliate Reno 1868, and we also signed a couple of youngsters that turns out they of course haven't made any single appearance, or they just are probably part of Reno 1868 right now. But just when we about to get start of the season, we got a very promising 4-0 victory against Reno 68. We got 4 goals in that first half too. That was pretty much the first time I've seen the Quakes score 4 goals in a game, and even score 4 goals in the first half. And then when we begin the season, we got a good 3-2 win against Minnesota. Yes, obviously we did give up those 2 goals late in the game, and there was a bit of a scare late in the game, but I thought that was one of the best performances I saw the Quakes play in a while. And I thought, you know, with the way how we've been playing in that game, maybe this season is going to be a season where we are going to make that next step. I mean, I've been talking about how last season when we did make the playoffs, I thought that, okay, yes, we made the playoffs, which is good. We ended that long drought of us not making the playoffs. But the thing is, the very next season, we need to pretty much put our expectation a little bit higher to the next step, where not only we need to make the playoffs, but we got to make sure we at least win 1 game or even host a playoff game at Avaya Stadium. And it looked like that was something that it was going to probably happen after what we saw in the first game. But this is when the false hope of the Quakes, and just the classic false hope the Quakes will always give you whenever you get optimistic. And in the early part of the season, we then got our first loss of the season. It was on the road against Sporting KC, and just like last season against Sporting KC on the road, we lost by 1 goal. And it was a game that I didn't think we played very badly on the road, but we also gave up a couple of bad goals in that game, and we conceded a couple of goals that should have been easily avoided. Our defense was a little bit better, and more of course on talking about defensive mistake in this video. And at that point, I didn't think that, you know, with some of the defensive mistake that we made, I didn't think it was going to be a season kind of trending thing that we're going to have every single game. But then after the Sporting KC game, we went back home to NYCFC, and this game, I felt like we absolutely got robbed. And I really think this was a game that we should have definitely won this game. We were much more the dominant side against NYCFC, and just NYCFC had 2 chances in this game, and both of those chances were in the back of the net, and it was just a classic case of us just not being clinical enough, and that NYCFC was just by far the more clinical side, and they just threw us 2 sucker punch goal in that game right around the 55th and the 57th minute, and just like that we lost that one 2-1. And then heading into the next game against Philly, we actually got a point in that game. Like, we actually, for once on the road, especially against an Eastern Conference team, which is something that we always tends to do very badly and tends to never get anything out of that game, we actually got a point against the Union. Although, to be fair, I feel like we should have probably got 3 points in that game, because the Union didn't really do much of attack in the game, and once again we gave up a goal in the 62nd minute because of lapse of concentration, and we drew this game 1-1. But at that point I was still satisfied that we got a point out of that, because, you know, we're playing an Eastern Conference team, and usually that is a game that we usually will never get a point in the past. And then when we play against the Dynamo, I thought this was a game that we probably have to win, consider how things have gone so far. And, you know, this is probably the easiest opponent that we will face besides Philly and Minnesota. And guess what happened in that game? We drew that game 2-2. And I'll tell you what, that game, we were lucky to drew 2-2 in that game, because we were down 2-1 in that game, and we were heading into the 80th minute, and I thought for sure that we were gonna lose that game, because it was a very uninspiring kind of performance. But fortunately, Hika, with that late goal magic, something that we've been doing a lot last season, well, he did it again in the 85th minute, scoring a late goal, and that turns out to still be the only goal that he has scored so far this season. I mean, talk about how Jameer Hika being one of the most promising and one of the most exciting player last season, to this season just being a complete flop, and that he isn't even good enough to try to be on the starting 11 anymore, and not even good enough to get substitute off the bench. Now, granted, he has had a couple of injury problems this season, and maybe that has to do with the fact of his decline this season, but still, it's certainly a big decline of how we saw Jameer Hika from last season to Jameer Hika of this season. He doesn't make those good kind of run in the wing area, and he doesn't use his pace to try to burn defense in that wing area like he has done a couple of times last season. And then after that Houston game, you know, we got 2 back-to-back Eastern Conference game, and at that point I was praying that at least we get something out of those games, because we were playing Orlando City and Columbus. Both of those teams are very tough, and unsurprisingly we lost both of them. But that Columbus Crew game, we should have got a point out of that game, and you're gonna also hear me talk a lot of should've and what if, because there have just been games this season that I felt like we could have easily got something out of if we would have either just hold on to the lead or not make some silly defensive mistake. And in that Columbus Crew game, that was a classic example of us unable to hold on to try to preserve a draw. You know, we were just 4 minutes away to getting a point against Columbus, and it was a game that we didn't play very well in the first half, but the second half it looked like we were potentially going to get a win. But then once again, a lapse of concentration, and the defense become absolute shambolic in the last 5 minutes, and we concede a goal, and it turns out that was a game that we didn't get any point, just like the Orlando City game. I mean, the Orlando City game, yeah, that was not a good performance whatsoever. We were even so lucky to had a chance to get an equalizer, because Orlando City, they probably could have won that one 4-1 or 4-0 in that game. But, you know, we come back home, we didn't get anything in the Eastern Conference double road trip, and then we play against a Portland Timbers, where I thought this was probably the time when we finally end this long losing streak and this winless streak, and that we can finally end this home kind of winless streak where it's been now going for 2 months. But no, instead, we lose to the Portland Timber 1-0, and it was a game where I don't know what was Michael Starhay tactics in that game. I think his main tactics was just to get a 0-0 draw at home, which is absolutely disgusting. And eventually we concede a goal late in the game because Diego Valeri finally shows up and finally made a crucial free kick goal, which could have been easily avoided if Godoy does not make an absolute silly foul right outside the box. I mean, you know, that is, if you go back to that game, you can pretty clear to see that was just a very clumsy kind of tackle by Godoy. You know, Valeri wasn't really in a dangerous area where he's gonna deliver a good ball into the box or just run past the fence. No, Godoy just hacked him down in a bad area, and what do you know? Valeri basically punished us by that. Not the first time we have seen him score a crucial goal for the Portland Timbers, and we lost that game 1-0, and it was a very frustrating game. But then when we go back on the road, and when we started this probably the easiest stretch that we will ever get for the rest of the season, I thought, you know, if we can get something out of this stretch, and if we can just win some games doing this easy stretch, then maybe we can get back into the playoff picture. And it looked like in the first 2 games of this easy stretch, it looked like we were going to get back in the playoff picture. I mean, we finally got a win against Minnesota, the same team that we actually beat in the first game of the season. We beat them 3-1, and then in that game against Vancouver we drew 2-2, although to be fair we should have won that game because once again defensive mistake, and once again it was Salinas that cost us the point, and he was also one of the guys that also cost us the point back in that Houston game, because one of the goals that Houston scored was because of a mistake by Salinas. And you know, we drew 2-2 in that game, and although it was pretty frustrated that I couldn't see the team get a win in that game, and it would have been a huge win and just a rare 6-pointer on the road in these 2 games. I mean, when is the last time the Quakes have gone on the road and got 6 points in 2 of those road games? It is very, very rare. But unfortunately, like it has been so far throughout this season, when just as you thought you were going to give the Quakes some hope, and just as you thought that they were going to start to ride the ship and turn this thing around, when they got home and play against DC United, a game that I thought it was a guaranteed 3 points, and it turns out it was more of a guaranteed 3-0 going down before the first half than really a 3 points that we were going to get. And in fact, that is exactly what happened. We went down 3-0 in that game. It was probably the most embarrassing, one of the worst, if not the worst, home performance I have ever seen the Quakes play against DC United. And all 3 of those goals was just defensive mistake. All 3 of those goals was the reason why we are having a very bad season, and it was the reason why I've been endlessly saying the defense is an absolute mess, and that game just completely proved it. You know, we did get a goal back in that game, but it doesn't really matter because we didn't really come back from that game. And the fact that we couldn't score more than 1 goal against DC United, a DC United team that have not won a game on the road all season, and 2, the defense is as bad as our defense right now, and yet we still couldn't solve their defense and we couldn't break them down. I mean, it was an absolute embarrassing display from us. And in the next game against the Cali Classico, just as I thought it wouldn't get any worse, well, we lost that one 1-0, and it was another game where Michael Starhay decided to play for a 0-0 draw, even though it doesn't really make sense why we're playing a 0-0 draw away to StubHub Center. Okay, yes, we have not had a good record against the Galaxy at StubHub Center, but at that time the Galaxy was really struggling at home, and pretty much everybody has beaten the Galaxy away, and for some reason we give up a goal in the 85th minute by Alessandrini, and we probably could have got the equalizer if Bingham did not make an incredible save right near the end of the game, and we lost that one 1-0, and I was absolutely fuming after that one. And just as things couldn't get any worse, we lost to Chicago the very next week in a typical Eastern Conference Quakes kind of away performance. And then if things could not get any worse, if just everything that has been gone wrong, everything that makes me upset to be a Quakes fan, the game against LAFC, I'm not even gonna mention it. You probably know what happened in that game. Just mentioning that game just gives me PTSD of what happened that night, and how in the world, not only how in the world did we not win that game, but how in the world did we lose that game right late in the game. And again, I'm not gonna mention it very much, or I'm not even gonna mention at all, because that was one of the most heartbreaking loss that I've ever suffered. And that was a game that I definitely did not expect us to win, and yet they still broke my heart. I mean, in a game where I didn't expect much and I didn't have any confidence that we were gonna win, they still somehow find a way to disappoint me and break my heart right at the end of the game. It's just that is pretty much how typical this season has been. And then coming into the very next one against New England, where that was a game where nobody really showed up, because I don't blame them. Who would even care about the Quakes anymore after how bad this season has been, and how it's only been 3 days after every Quakes fan has suffered probably one of the most heartbreaking moment in our recent memory. And you know, in that game against New England, I thought we were going to lose that one. We did drew that game 2-2, and in some way you could say that was kind of felt more like a win than it is a draw, even though technically, again, we did not play very well in that game either. But we finally got a draw and ended this losing streak that is just so depressing. And then after that, going into the next game against RSL, I thought that was another game that we were probably going to lose, because RSL has a pretty good home record. They haven't lost at home or dropped point at home in a long time. And somehow we drew 1-1 in that game. Like, I don't know how we were able to get a point out of that game. And in some way, I think we were kind of lucky in that game, because there were a couple of fouls that should have been definitely called against us, but it wasn't. And then in the Cali Clasico last week, when we went down 3-1 against the Galaxy, I thought for sure that we were done. Like, this was the old Quakes that I know, and then this is going to be how it is going to continue throughout this season. But yet, we came back in that game and drew 3-3, and at least in that game, I can say that the team did show some resilience and show some fight, but at the same time, defensive mistake, and once again, Tarbell, the goalkeeper, costing us goal, which I haven't really mentioned it a lot so far, or in my video and during the time where I talk about what has happened this season with the Quakes. But you better believe Tarbell has made a couple of really bad save, and just made a couple of goals that he should have easily saved, and is another reason why I always said that we need a new goalkeeper. But going forward and looking at the Quakes season, you know, for me, it's really hard to say that this team can have any hopes of getting back into the playoff. I mean, if I say that, I would be one of the most deluded MLS fan in the world right now, because if you look at the problems that we have right now and just what has gone wrong this season, I feel like we just need to once again start all over again. We need to get back to square one. You know, we got to spend this second half part of the season to try to get the balance right, and try to maybe compete next season, and try to maybe get back to where we were a year ago, but definitely a little bit more better. Because let's face it, right now the defense, it needs a complete overhaul, and it's pretty clear that ever since we lost Victor Bernardes and a couple of our rock solid defensive pieces like Marvel Wayne, we just have not found a left back or not left back, but a center back that can be really a rock solid center back. Besides probably Florian Youngworth, that so far he is a guy that is really our only center backs that can be rock solid and shown that sign Marvell Wayne and Victor Bernardes has. And he's not even a center back. He is a central defenseman, and we keep playing him in that holding mid position. And then the other issue that we got to address, and I'm pretty sure everybody has been saying this, and I've been saying it all this time, is that we got to address that left back position. I mean, ever since Stewart left this team, we have no answer whatsoever in that left back position. It's almost like that left back position is non-existent, and that every single game it felt like we were just playing down to 10 men without a left back, because there is just nobody on this team that can play in that left back position. And although Partita has done kind of decent job in that left back position, we still need a left back. And I hope that we were going to get one in the summer transfer window. And also we need a new goalkeeper in the summer transfer window. I mean, I don't know why in the world did we decide not to get William Yarbrough. I mean, I know that the Quakes say that it was a little bit too expensive to trying to get William Yarbrough, and they need to save that money to address some other issue. Well, guess what? If that is the case, then I expect you to definitely use that money to address other issue like the left back. Because if they don't figure that out, if they say that and they don't address the other issue that they have this summer, then they are not only lying to us, but they're being cheap again. And that has been one of the biggest problem with the Quakes. This ownership is just being so cheap, and even though we are in one of the biggest market in MLS, whatever reason, our owner just keep being cheap and just keep buying guys that is just, it's been unproven, and just guys that they have shown talent in other leagues, but we don't know what's going to happen in the MLS. And I'm just so tired of seeing that time and time in again. I think it is really time for the Quakes, and especially this ownership, to finally spend some money. Please, spend some money, stop being cheap, get some guys that is going to be, definitely a promising player, and just pay those guys. And even if you need to spend extra money on it, do it. Don't just sit around thinking that it's just too expensive to get that guy because we need to address other issue, and we brought in a random guy for cheap just to maybe that will be a reason to, that will be the case to solve our issue. No, I don't want to see that happening. And I hope in this summer transfer window, and really this summer transfer window will really determine the fate of Jesse Fornelli. And as much as I love Jesse Fornelli, as much as I've always been a person that backed Jesse Fornelli, it's getting really hard to back him up and say that he needs to potentially be sacked sooner or later, because of all the talks of him trying to potentially improve the team and trying to rebuild, and all that talk about how he made some big mistake and stuff like that this season and not addressing our expectation. Well, guess what? One, that is a mistake that is clearly a mistake that shouldn't be made by any GM whatsoever. And two, actually start to do something and actually start to go out and get some of those guys that we definitely need to do, and just address some of the biggest issue that us fans clearly are yelling at you right now. And it's not even that hard to figure out what is our main issue. So, and I'm just hoping that throughout this next couple of weeks, these next couple of weeks, it's definitely not gonna, we do have another kind of easy stretch, you would say, in July when we have to play Montreal, Seattle, and RSL. And I'm not even gonna say that we're gonna get guaranteed 3 points in those games, because you know what happened when I say that before. But just for the rest of the season, I just want the Quakes to at least just kind of like salvage and just trying to fight their way to maybe get some wins. All I want this team is just to give some effort in each game and just give it all. And even if it's in a losing cause, then if you give your effort in each game, then us fans can't really complain anymore about it, because at least they give their extra effort. And even though the quality of our team is definitely not much better than the other team, and that probably is the reason why we lost the game, then so be it. It is what it is. And we will that is going to be an issue that potentially we are going to resolve in the near future. But right now, that is something that we just cannot complain. But the problem for this season is that we are clearly seeing a bunch of guys underachieve and not playing for the shirt and not giving it all. And that is where I'm just very frustrated about this team, and almost as I don't want to support this team anymore. Like, at times when I go to games, I don't even enjoy watching them anymore. That is how much this team has sucked out of me, and that is how much that it just makes me feel really, really depressed about this team. But either way, guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think about some of the things that happened for the first half of the season? What is something that we got to address in the second half of the season? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.